All right, I want to take a few minutes to kind of talk about the final assignment. I uh, I was on the road Saturday coming down, so I tried to get back to everybody. I'm going to be working through stuff today. Um, a few things kind of going through, and I decided to do a video lecture rather than trying to write this out because I think it'll be easier to go through and explain. So some of you guys have questions, and so there's a few points that I want to make sure that you guys are really checking for your papers. One of them is all the papers need to really be edited through for grammar, punctuation, spelling errors, anything like that. So I suggest, have your paper reviewed by someone who's probably not in the class, and someone who's actually going to do a really good job of tearing your paper up. The reason for that is that the people who are going to tear your paper up who are going to be nitpicky are the ones that are really going to find things that you need to be looking at. And you always have the choice when you go back through to accept their comments and their changes or to ignore it. So that's the first thing. The other thing is make sure your APA styling is correct. So a couple of things. Anytime you use direct quotes, you have to have a page number. Make sure that any type of parentheses or quotation marks are closed. Several papers I've seen where it's probably just an early editing mistake where the quotation starts, you have the quotation, and then there's a citation at the end, but the quotation doesn't actually close the sentence. That's something that's going to get you points counted off because it's a small error, but it's a significant one. Especially in direct quotes, you need to know exactly where that quotation closes. So, a couple other things. Let's start from the top of the paper. The context, for the most part, I think everybody has down. Within that context section, you want to make sure that it's very explicit at the end that there's a research question. The reason for that research question is what is the reader getting into when they're reading your paper? They want to know upfront. The research question, or what you guys have had, is a thesis statement. Should be a very explicit. Here's what I'm looking at. So you can kind of say in a question framing, such and such, or you can say usually you'll see something like this study seeks to examine, and then you kind of say what you're looking at. So, for example, this study seeks to examine the relationship between parents and children during the lunchtime literacy hour. Um, in particular, I want to examine what are the motivational effects and behavioral outcomes that are observed. Lastly, how do these play into such and such? And that really sets up the reader, kind of what they're thinking. The second part with the context, some of you guys have had questions about, you can really do anything. So if you're still struggling with a topic, you can look at any type of personal experience, whether in the classroom or not in the classroom. It doesn't matter. Um, So some of the things when you guys are looking at context, if you have classroom experience, you can pull from that. That's fine. If you don't have classroom experience, or you're trying to think of something to do other than education related, I use the example of Starbucks. I mean, Starbucks, any type of place like that or the mall is really kind of a cool place to really watch and observe and be able to report that. So in Starbucks, you may have something like, Starbucks has a lot of like philanthropy oriented things. The new, I think it's Indivisible coffee, that's like twice as expensive, but part of that goes to some type of unemployment campaign that they're doing. So, you could basically sit in Starbucks and look at, who are the people there, what's the type of work that they're doing. All of these are observations that you would take and kind of compile in notes. Are people doing business, or does it seem like they're doing business, or are they basically, drinking coffee and screwing around on Facebook and Twitter? Um, so there's a lot of different things you could choose that context. Somebody else in the class is doing, looking at the protest of bath salts in Batavia, which, that's another example too. You could look at what type of events going on. How do you understand that event? That's what we're really talking about when we're doing kind of research like this. Is how do we understand and how it's building upon our knowledge. For the purpose of this, what I'm really looking at content-wise is everything connecting well. So, from basically the context to the lit review to your descriptive narrative part, and then to the analysis and implications. Everything should be very well connected. So moving into the analysis part, some of you guys have had questions. The citations and things that you use in the lit review should be used in analysis. That's to bring back in a connection with the reader to make sure, if you use Thomas 2010 and looking at some type of behavioral model theory, saying that just for example, in your lit review, if that comes into your analysis, then you should use that and use the citation. What you don't want to do in analysis is kind of leave the reader hanging with a lot of assumption, because you have to think, if you're doing a thesis or a dissertation, when you do the lit review, it's usually either embedded in the first chapter, or it's just a second chapter where you do a full kind of overview of literature. By the time you go to analysis, this is going to be towards the end. You don't want the reader to have to feel like they have to go back and reread your chapter. So it's always good in analysis to just bring those citations back in for the reader, so you make a clear connection that when I'm saying Thomas or McDowell and whoever that So and like with the analysis part, when we're talking about themes and typology, like I said, if you're using Starbucks, is there kind of a theme of propaganda? Is there a theme of capitalism there? Starbucks is a corporation. Starbucks makes a lot of money. What would be the critique of that? You can even take things like the Pink Ribbon campaign and kind of look at that and analyze it. The Pink Ribbon campaign for breast cancer, you have things like KFC had the Pink Bucket campaign. Everything is pink, pink, pink. When you actually get into looking at that, and if you're a woman, you probably know breast cancer is not the number one killer. So in your analysis, one of the things you kind of would think about is, or probably even part of your research question, why is so much attention paid to this pink campaign when it's not the number one killer amongst women? And then, of course, too, with the pink campaign, you have the Save the Tatas. You would never see a campaign like Save These Nuts for testicular cancer. So, those types of things would kind of be the anomalies that you would look at and kind of the phenomena that you would point out in your analysis, and then kind of back that up with the literature that's already been written about, whether that's theoretical research literature or actual empirical data that's been collected. The implications and conclusion part is really important, because some of you have put, kind of what does this mean to me? And that's not really what the conclusion and implications, are for, and what you want to do. In that section, what you want to hone in on is, what is the implication for research? So the reason we have research is the idea of epistemology, the study of knowledge, how we create knowledge. So would your project be building upon anything that we know? So in a sense, how does this add to what we know? How does it complicate what has already been done? So those are the things, when you're in the implication and conclusion section, you want to kind of frame. I know some of you, from what I've glanced in the papers that have been sent to me, you kind of want to say, like, here's what it means to me, and that's fine. But what you really want to do is really talk about is it generalizable to some type of scope? So for example, we have if we're using Starbucks and this kind of philanthropy and capitalism, or what people have termed philanthrocapitalism, what are the implications for how we understand that, and the idea of the products we purchase? Is there a consciousness? Does it really matter? If you're looking at something like literacy of the lunchtime hour and motivation or something like that, were the same pedagogical elements that were used for motivation and capturing attention with students, were they really working? So someone's theoretical model was, oh, we should do this, this, and this. Does it really matter? So those are the types of things you want to have your own personal, how this affects me in the classroom. But the real important part of the conclusion and implications for research is, does this study really matter, or does this show us anything new? And even if it doesn't show us anything new, does it show us a continuation of what we already know? So, if we're looking at, 1980s report says basically if you have a black student in an urban area who's in this income bracket, whose parents didn't go to school, etc., is that formula that was applied by so and so, is that going to have the same impact today? And if you see that, yes, we still see the same formula. If you take a student who's black, who's in the urban area, who's in this income bracket, and all these elements, it still kind of seems to lead to an already foretold future for them. And so that's something that, if you're familiar with Jonathan Kozol, people say, he writes the same book every time. But he says, it's a book I wish I didn't have to write. And the reason we have that is because if the same things are going on in the 1980s that are happening now, 30 years later, what is that telling us about what we're doing or not doing? And then also, too, is it kind of the kind of impossible situation, which we as teachers know, that, is this something that really is beyond our realm or scope to address? So those are the types of things, what I really like when I see a conclusion and implication section in either an article or dissertation or wherever, is that there's kind of questions that are left. So, it's looking at literacy, it's like, well, this did really well here, but, if we look at the majority of our students, they're middle to upper class, they're white, there's a lot of resources. Can we apply this same thing to, basically black or Latino students in an urban area that don't have as good of library resources? So those are the types of things you kind of complicate. So it's, implications for further research as well. So you're providing questions of, these are things that still need to be answered. But you guys have basically 5 to 7 pages, no more than 7 pages. And so what you're really trying to do is give a glimpse, but also you're really trying to be succinct about the different pieces. And what I'm looking for is everything, one, the grammar, punctuation, all of that is not a concern. And that's something, being at the graduate level, and I know some of you may get away with it in other classes where that's not an emphasis, but if you want to be taken seriously and you want to be respected as a professional, you have to make sure that the writing you're doing is solid and that you're also developing yourself as a writer, because believe it or not, that really is important. The other part is, just the connection with everything. So that's why I say probably the last thing you want to do once you've kind of gone through, you've edited, you've made corrections, you've shared with people in the class for ideas, have someone who is not in the class and not education influenced, but just kind of an outside external person. If they can read it and it makes sense, then you're probably good to go. If they read it and they have questions, then there are probably things that you want to look back over. For the type of thing that we're doing with this, it should be very fluid and very easy to follow. We're not talking about molecular biology or some type of, quantum physics and string theory and try to explain something like that. This is explaining a phenomenon. We're kind of telling a story and analyzing it. So it should be very fluid and very easy for people. So that's why I say if someone reads it and they have, questions about it, you may want to re-examine, did you overlook something? Is something not quite explained, or is there ambiguities and those types of things? So like I said, don't get people who are going to be friendly with your paper. Get people who are going to tear it up and really give you critical feedback. I'm going to be working in the schools Wednesday through Friday training teachers. So I'm probably, I'll be able to check my email, but it's going to be a long day, so I'm going to be fairly exhausted. So I can't guarantee that I can look at much. But if you have like a section that you want me to kind of look at, you can email me. But like I said, any comment I give you that's preliminary, take it as this is a very quick review. Upon final revision and, when I actually go through with a fine-tooth comb, you may have more critical comments. So, in a sense, don't hold me to, if I didn't tell you something and you gave me it, but I say something later on, it's because I'm looking over these very quickly to try and help you guys. So, probably the best thing, if you can text me with questions throughout this week. Like I said, Wednesday through Friday, maybe a little bit iffy because I'm going to be in the schools. But in the afternoons, I'll try and set aside some time. If you do need to call and touch base, the easiest thing is just text me first and see is there a good time. Since I'm going to be driving from Bloomington back up to Indianapolis, which is about a 50-minute drive, I can talk on the phone if needed. That gives me something to do in the car, so that's not a problem. Other than that, from what I've heard from people, it seems like everybody's on the right track and shouldn't be an issue to follow out or to get everything done. Of course, if papers are turned in today, the 30th, and there's no time limit with that, as long as when I see it's turned in, it says July 30th. Even if you turn it in at 11:59 tonight, that's fine. It just helps me to get kind of a head start on grading throughout the week so that when the weekend comes, I don't have to spend the whole weekend just trying to grade 20 papers. You guys also don't want that because if you're the first 5 papers, that's really good for you because I'm really fresh. By the time I get to the last, 15 through 20, I'm very tired and, there could be things that are overlooked or things that are, commented. I mean, you guys know grading takes a lot out of you. So I try and splice it up so that I have a lot of freshness and that I can see things clearly and not be overwhelmed. So, try and get papers in today if you want the 10 bonus points. Also, too, about that, the 10 bonus points can be cut up. So, for this assignment, if you get a 90 or 95, I'm not going to give you the 10 bonus points on this because you're already going to make an A. I'm going to look at, did you need the bonus points on something else? So, if it's the article critique or if it's the, the philosophy paper, which some people I know could use those points, I'm going to redirect those points over there. So the 10 points can be used across the board, not just with this paper. So I think that's pretty much it, everything to cover. Check the Facebook. That's probably the easiest for me to put up quick announcements and I'll put the same announcement through Angel as well, but the Facebook page, make use out of that for the rest of the week. So we'll also have evaluations. Probably I need to see what I have to do with those since we're an online course. I have to make a phone call, but I'll send out an email about those, and we'll do those probably midway through this week and get those out of the way. Just contact me if you need anything else.